couple of our properties have ended up on the news. That passive cash flow, to me, that was huge. I technically didn't have to go to work 8 hours for it. It covered our groceries. And I'm like, groceries are taken care of by this purchase we made every month. And that was a very addictive. I was like, let's do it again. And I will keep coming back to this because that's one of the biggest lessons I would love to share.
Before we get started with today's video, I really want to urge you all to stick around through the entire duration of this video because our guest, IBK, has a very special offer at some point in this video for our viewers. And this offer is for his real estate program, which I'm so confident is going to benefit you all. So make sure you stick around and enjoy. Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new to this channel, my name is Dahun Kehinde and I'm so delighted to have you all here today. And if you have not done so already, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel as well. I'm honestly so excited about today's video because it's a video that I'm very confident is going to help a lot of people out there, right? Because everyone, I was going to say most people, but I believe it's everyone wants to make money, right? And I know that a lot of people don't want to sweat when it has to do with making money. And if we go on social media, everyone is always talking about soft life. I don't know too much about soft life, but I know people want to buy the cars they want to buy, they want to go on the vacations they want to go for. And in this video, what if I tell you that you're going to be learning about one of the avenues that would make you get into financial freedom, right? That would allow you make good passive income. So I'm really excited because I have an amazing guest with me who is, should I say, a professional in the game, right? His name is IBK, right? And I'm going to give him the chance to introduce himself. But just to give everyone a backstory. So I was on Instagram, some time ago, right? And I came across this reel that IBK and his wife did.
Let's throw it back to about 8 years ago when me and my husband
where they spoke about how they had secured 18 properties within a very short period of time. Yes, I said 18, and that was so huge. So that's one of the reasons why I was like, I need to bring him on this channel to share his journey to 18 properties within 4 years. That is amazing. So without further ado, I'm just going to give IBK the opportunity to introduce himself, and we're going to dive straight to the interview. So IBK, on to you.
Name is IBK. I am a student, like all of us, trying to learn and figure out the best way to make our lives a little bit better. You just mentioned like soft life. Everybody is chasing to make their lives easier over time. And we want to know how to continue to improve on that. So the backstory started as an engineering consultant, continued to do that, started investing in real estate in about 2017. And then after we started doing that, learned a lot of lessons along the way, and 4 years later, we realized that, like Dahun just mentioned, we were in management of about 18 rental units. And hopefully this conversation today will provide some insight into our backstory, some of the decisions and lessons we learned going through that experience, and maybe provide some motivation for people going forward to learn from some of the mistakes we made.
Yes, no, I'm so excited about that, honestly, yeah, because there's always challenges we face in our journey, and I really feel, yes, sharing this story would hopefully help motivate other people, especially those that maybe are already in the game but are struggling for whatsoever reason, or even help others that are trying to get into this. Awesome. So I'm just going to get started, right? So I'll say my big question to you is, what sparked your interest in real estate?
I would say it was something that we just randomly fell into. Right around like 2016, we had just started our careers in engineering. We were in the oil and gas industry, and anybody who's been in the oil and gas industry knows that it's a very cyclical business. So that means it has boom times and down times, and this was one of the down times. And a lot of our companies were preparing to do layoffs, right? And we were both in the same industry, and we had just started our careers. We had just bought our first house that we're living in, and all of a sudden you're saddled with this fear that, man, I'm about to lose my job. You just took on this huge mortgage debt, and you're worried. You're like, man, this is scary. Luckily, we both made it through the layoff period, and I realized that I don't want to feel like that again. That feeling of helplessness and feeling like your life is in someone else's hands. And we were thinking of, okay, how do we make our financial situation a little bit more robust? Without knowing much, we had heard back in the day, our parents always tell us, oh, make sure you invest in capital projects. Real estate is the best. Nobody really knew what to do. And we lived in Houston at the time. We found out that there was a new development in the east of the downtown area where brand new townhomes were being set up. I didn't know anything apart from this is a new up and coming area. And so we decided that we were going to go purchase a property there without knowing. I knew nothing about calculating return on investment. We knew nothing, right? And we just decided this is what we're going to do because this is the right thing to do, right? Precursor to that, I would like to highlight, because this sounds really crazy that, wow, they just decided that they were going to buy something. The reason we were able to do that is from the very beginning, we made the decision that we were going to live way below our means. We're actually living on less than 50% of what we made, and we had a lot of excess left over. And that really removes any sense of anxiety from your day-to-day activities. You don't feel fear. New, random expenses that come up you don't really sweat it because you're just living way below what you can actually afford. And people always looked like it was funny because, we didn't change our lifestyle and we made more money, but we actually didn't change our lifestyle. So whenever we got to the point where we're like, yeah, let's go buy a property, it wasn't like a big decision because you have all this money sitting there because you're not touching it. So we're like, let's go ahead and do it. So we did it. And luckily, without knowing, the best decision was, it was a brand new construction. I think it was about 6 months till when the house was ready. We contracted, and after we contracted, I remember the deposit was $5,000 to contract and lock it down. So we put the $5,000 down, and I started to think that, okay, what have I done? I'm about to take on this additional mortgage debt and I have no idea. And that 6 months forced me to start doing research, knowing that I had this massive expense coming on the back end. Start to understand how to analyze real estate, start to go through the rabbit hole of improving my knowledge of the industry, the area we were buying in, how to source tenants, looking at property management. And I wasn't ready, but the thing that tipped me over the edge, for those of us who are trying to make that first investment property, there were times where should I just cancel and lose this $5,000 that I put in? And I realized that, okay, the worst case scenario is not that I'm saddled with this. I think the mortgage on the house was like $1,800 a month or something like that. I'm saddled with $1,800 into perpetuity. There has to be a minimum rent amount that somebody will be willing to stay in this property. It might be less than $1,800, but it's not going to be zero. There's not going to be a time where somebody would not want to live in this brand new house. I might be able to rent it for $1,500. I might be able to rent it for $1,200, but it's not going to be zero. And so when I did that, did small analysis, and I was like, okay, cool. So the absolute worst case scenario is I rent this house for $1,500, and I'm saddled with a $300 payment into perpetuity. And I was like, another thing that goes into living way below your means, I'm like, can I take $300 payment as a learning mistake into perpetuity? I was like, yes, I can do that. And that was what tipped me over without even learning anything. So went ahead, purchased that, and that was the beginning of the journey. When you get that first rent check that you didn't pay for, and you didn't have to like go to the office for. It's an addictive drug, and we were like, I got to do this again. I got to do this again, and that's how our journey started. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
Oh, no. You mentioned so many great things. I would say like one of the things that stood out to me is you both being in a period of layoffs, and you did not want to go through that situation again and be worried about your finances. I think that's so important. You were not laid off, right? It was just a layoff season. Exactly.
Yeah.
It only took you going through that season, of course, living through that fear just one time before making this decision. And I believe that's a learning for other people out there, right? Because I also understand how that feels. Earlier last year as well, my company too was doing layoffs, and they were doing 3 rounds of layoffs. So we had to wait for, I think, several months, right, before knowing your fate. So I definitely understand that feeling of, oh my God, like, are my finances secure? So it's just a learning for other people out there that, I mean, if kudos to you if you've never been through a season of layoffs before, but this is a reminder that you don't need to wait to get to that point before thinking about the next steps for your finances, so that you're not worried if such a situation should come up. And there's also something else that you mentioned that I really love, that you said that you both were making more money, but you were living way below your means, right? Is that the right? Yeah. Something I've actually learned is that a lot of people feel like if I should make more money, I'll be financially free. But that's not true. Sometimes it's about what your expenses are, right? Because we've heard stories of maybe even celebrities that end up getting so much money and then they end up going bankrupt. So not necessarily is it about how much you're making, but how much you're spending. So this even takes me to my next question. How was it like living below your means? I say that because on the outside, you know, like social media, people just judge things, right? A lot of people would see your pictures, like you and Tolani's pictures, and be like, man, they are living the life, because you all go on vacations, you all, I mean, have a nice house, like I'm seeing behind you and whatnot. So I'm just curious, like, how you're able to make it work. Like, what are some of those sacrifices you're making?
I think what really helps it make it work is understanding what you personally value and not what the impression of what other people have of you, if that makes sense, right? So, for example, we value experiences, and we don't really value a lot of like quote unquote material things, right? And so I don't need to wear the best designer clothes because that's not where my values are. Now, would like people look at that as a perception of their sense of worth on the outside, and that's perfectly fine. And so if the things that, there were many things, you know, our friends were able to do and were experiencing at the time that would have looked nice, but it wasn't truly where our values were, so we just didn't participate. And, you know, it's not because we couldn't, quote unquote, afford it, but I was like, you're looking at opportunity costs of, okay, I could invest this or do this thing, not because I really enjoy it, but because it looks good to other people. And just having that sense of grounding within yourself and like, okay, why am I really doing this? Is it because I really enjoy this activity? Or is it because I just want to look good to my friends or to the outside on social media? And when you're able to disconnect your mind and focus inward on what is really important to you, you realize that the things that are very important, you don't necessarily have to spend so much money on. And so, like, you know, the first house we bought, it wasn't because it was the nicest house we could afford, but we just said, okay, we need a house to stay. We want to get away from renting. Let's buy something that just meets the bare minimum of what we want. We know we're not going to stay here forever, so why do we need to spend all this money on all this extra things, knowing that over a while we're going to keep upgrading our lifestyle and potentially rent this out, right? And so, like, just those little things really help to ground your focus on, do I really care about this? And if you care about it and it's truly important to you, by all means, focus on your own values.
Yeah.
But always ask yourself, is this for other people or is it for me?
I love that. No, that's really good, because a lot of people have that 1, 2, or few things that are important to them. Like for me, I honestly don't care about cars. I'm still driving a 2010 Toyota Toyota Camry, right? But for me, I love vacations. I love hotels, right? So that's something that even though I love to save money, I'd rather spend money on there as opposed to buying the most. I don't even think I have any designer shoes or clothes, right?
Same
So
here.
I really love what you're saying. Like really focus on that thing that is most important to you and don't let other people pressure you into going into things you don't want to go into. Well, awesome. So now, yeah, I guess let's go back to your first property. So I believe you mentioned it was a townhome, right?
Yep.
Yes,
Townhome.
it was a townhome, and you purchased that property, and you and your family lived there for some time before renting out. Was that the case?
No. So we had bought our first home that we're living in. And
Yes.
after the experience I just shared, we were like, okay, we want to start investing, right? And so we decided to go buy another house. And this was the townhome that we purchased, the first investment property.
Oh, I see. So is it safe to say both the first two homes were townhomes, or one was a single family? Or
One was a regular single family. The home we were
okay.
living in was a single family, and then our first investment was a townhome.
I see. Awesome. Yeah, and I asked that because I'm curious to know what were some of the challenges you faced in securing your, should I say, your first two homes,
Okay.
and even speaking about the challenges as well. I know you touched a little bit on this earlier on, but curious to know why you decided to go for, of course, single family and townhome first, because I know in real estates we have multi-family homes, there are other types of homes. So curious to also know, like, what were the reasons why you went for those two, for single family and townhome as your first two properties, and what were some of those challenges you faced along the way?
Of course. So I'll back up a little bit. And I remember I just started working, graduated college, started working, and I was living in an apartment at the time in the middle of nowhere. And there was a guy at work, and I was talking to him, and he mentioned that, look, you're renting, but if you bought a house, it's almost the same as renting. It's just that the down payment and the deposit is bigger. And I would never forget that statement. I was like, that is true. And I continued to research, and I was like, that is kind of true. It's almost like renting, but your deposit is larger. And that was what convinced me to decide to buy a house. And that was my first lease out of college. I decided that once my 1 year was over, we were going to go buy a house because, it was like the right thing to do. And Talani and I were looking to get married at the time. So at first we're looking at other nicer rentals where we could move in together, because like I said, I like to live below my means. So the apartment I was staying in was not really, not the best apartment to be in. And I was just like, I don't care. I never spend any time here anyway. So we went ahead and changed our mind to go buy a house. We started the process. The benefit was we both had good credit. Actually, Tawny had good credit. My credit was really non-existent at the time, but we were we had good enough credit to get started there, and we just literally went through a regular mortgage application process. We bought a house that just fit the needs we wanted. We weren't looking for anything too fancy. I think it was the first house we saw. We went on the listing website, looked, that looks good, let's go see it. We walked into it, and within like 5 minutes, we're like, yeah, this is it, let's go. And we just, because there was not a lot of like thought into it, because we need a house. This house looks good. It meets everything we need. It has rooms we need. So within 5 minutes, we're like, let's go. In 2 weeks, we were contracted, and we just moved in. All this because we had the buffer. And I will keep coming back to this, because that's one of the biggest lessons I would love to share, is when you're living way below what you make, there's a lot of luxury that is open to you that most people don't have.
Yeah.
And imagine like the realtor probably was thinking, oh man, this guy was making a lot of money. Like, no, we just have the buffer because you just walk into a house like, yeah, this is it, let's go. What do we take? What do we sign? And we progressed and we purchased and we started living in it. It was very comfortable. And we maintained the exact same lifestyle. What we were trying to do was I remember we're looking at now keep in mind this was around 2015, a nice apartment was going for like in Houston, and I'm just being clear, was like $1,500 a month. Now people would be like, wow, that is not really much, but at the time, $1,500 a month would have gotten you a nice apartment. And so what we tried to do was get a house that fit into the $1,500 a month mortgage payment. And that's all we tried to do because that was what we're going to rent anyway. So that helped us maintain the same lifestyle, continue doing that. And so when we got to the time to buy the first investment property, it was almost the same thought process. We need a 3-bedroom, 2-bath townhome in this eastern part of downtown. You go ahead, oh, this is available, I like this, let's go. And we just did it.
Well, I'm just shaking my head like I'm listening to a sermon because that is actually so true. Like I live in Chicago and I know like there are some homes downtown. This was like maybe some years ago that I knew some people that were paying probably maybe like close to $3,000 a month in rent. And I actually used to live in San Francisco Bay Area as well. And I knew people living in 2-bedroom apartments that were paying over $3,000. Some of them even $4,000 in rent. So what you're saying is actually so true. The only difference as well is that with rent, you're just losing all of that money. But with real estate, even though you're paying that money, you're building your equity, which is so true, right? Yeah, because if you're looking at mortgages today, right, you can buy homes that maybe your mortgage is even less than $2,000. Meanwhile, you may know someone else paying $2,000 in rent. So, wow, that is so... I keep on saying that's huge, but that is so big. And I'll continue to reiterate what you've been mentioning as well, that make sure you live below your means so that whenever you need to make such purchases, it's going to be very easy for you. Most luxury items or luxury things will be easy for you to afford if you have the money in the bank. Awesome. So the next question I have is, so you secured your first 2 properties, and today we're talking about 18 properties. So would like to know what got you excited about building your real estate portfolio.
Of course. So let's go with this. I didn't have a lot of knowledge going into that first investment property. I tried to learn as much as I can, but there's only so much you can cram into like 6 months between when you purchase and when the house is ready. And so one of the guardrails I set for myself was I hired property management, and I reached out to a local property management company, and I said, all right, cool, I have this property coming up, let's look at what it will rent for, blah, blah, blah. So they kind of walked me through the process. But the reason I was hiring the property management was not because I wanted to be hands-off. My personality, I like to know everything about anything I'm working on. So I love to be in the details. And I remember the property manager, whenever he was setting things up, every time he would go to do something, I would ask questions about every step, because I'm like, I'm not just going to be hands off and let you run the thing. I want to know. And there was a time he was like, this is my job. You know, you need to let me handle this. I'm like, no, I'm just really interested in learning. And so we went through the process, marketed the property, secured a tenant. And I think maybe 1 month after I understood rent collection, how to list the property, all that good stuff, he really downloaded a lot of knowledge to me. And I was like, okay, I feel ready. So I got rid of the property management because I was like, okay, I think I've learned everything I need to learn from you. And so I started to manage the property myself, introduce myself to the tenant, and started to navigate that relationship. And I remember, it's like I said, that passive cash flow, and I wouldn't call it necessarily passive, but it's more passive than a W-2 job. It's kind of addicting. And I will never forget, it was $200 a month. That was after I'd paid mortgage, taxes, it was $200 a month. And to me, that was huge. I'm like, this is $200 that I technically didn't have to go to work 8 hours for. And at the time, for the both of us, now keep in mind, this is like 2017 actually, it covered our groceries. And I'm like, groceries are taken care of by this purchase we made every month. And that was a very addictive, I was like, let's do it again. Luckily, we had some cash in the bank left over after we bought that property. And so this was in September of 2017. In March of 2018, we found another one because as soon as I collected the October, November rent, I was like, oh man, this is good. I've got to do it. So started looking. March, we're able to purchase another single family. And this one was a lot cheaper because one of the things I learned was, cash flow above appreciation. The reason why we bought that first townhome was because, okay, it's this nice up and coming area. The value of the property is going to go up over time. And as I continue my research, I'm like, you can't control the value or the appraised value of the property, but what you can control is the level of cash flow you have. And I went from buying the nicer townhomes, and this was like, lower middle class, single family, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. And the cash flow on this one, was actually twice the amount from the townhome, but the house was 50% cheaper. And that was when my mind went, okay, so this is what we're doing. Granted, one other thing is there are some sacrifices. Obviously, this comes with experience that you get. When you purchase like the higher end properties, the tenants you get are more sophisticated. They have access to web-based tools. You can reason with them. There's more, as you start to go down the pecking order in property style, the type of tenant changes, but the cash flow is higher. So there's no free lunch. You put more work into the property, but you get more cash flow, or you have a more hands-off approach, and but your cash flow is less. So I decided that I was willing to make that sacrifice on my end. And so we went ahead and we bought that second property. I think the cash flows ended up being about 350 to 400. I was like, okay, this is good. And ever since then, it was just like every year that was the property. And then the next one, we were like, okay, we need to start doing multifamily because I'm trying to kick up this pace. So right after that, we bought a 3-unit. And after the 3-unit, I decided that, man, I can't really call myself an investor, because once you tell your friends you bought one and they're like, oh, cool, good for you. And then you get a second one, they're like, oh, that's nice, how's that going? And then you become like the real estate guy among your friend group. And I felt like I was like, okay, we claim to be real estate investors, but I haven't done a rehab yet. So talked to Talani and we're like, okay, let's find a property we can rehab, and went ahead and did a full gut rehab of a property just to test it out. Now, these are the things, everything I'm saying, I have the awareness to say, like, everything I'm saying sounds crazy, right? Like the pace that we were going, but I just want to point it back to, because we did not improve our lifestyle, we're still living the same kind of life we had. So all this additional cash flow we're getting was just like cherry on top. We were just plowing it into the next thing, It wasn't used to step up your lifestyle over those periods. And so that's why the pace is just like a compounding effect, where the more properties you have, the more cash flow you have, the more you're able to save up to go put a down payment on the next one, and you just keep plowing like that. And so we just continued to do that, did the rehab, bought more multifamily, and that's how we kept on going till we got to 18.
So you mentioned that, you have the single family homes, you have the townhomes, you also have multifamily homes, you've also done a rehab as well. And for the rehab, was it a single family home rehab or?
Yes, it's a single family home rehab.
Okay, I see. And I'll say one of the things I liked that you mentioned, which kind of takes me to my next question, because I was going to ask about how you were able to finance those 18 properties. But something you mentioned is that whenever you have cash flow from your properties, you pour it in to the next property. So was that how you were able to of course, you took a loan, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, obviously you took a loan. So I guess, yeah, we can talk a little bit more about how you were able to finance all these properties, because I know that there are various things people do. I've heard of real estate line of credit. I've never done that. I mean, I'm also into real estate. We have two properties right now. The first property we did FHA, which is the first time home. Gosh, I forgot the full acronym meaning. Can you help me out? That's full.
It's the Federal Housing Authority loan, but it's typically for first-time home buyers.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, so we did that, and of course we did a conventional loan for our second property. But curious to know, of course, yes, you said you were pouring into your subsequent investments from the cash flow you were getting. But what did financing look like for those 18 properties?
For sure. I would say one of the things, or the things people miss when it comes to like getting a loan, right? Obviously, you have to have good credit, make on-time payments, all that good stuff, and then they look at your debt to income, right? And when you're purchasing investment properties, one of the good things about it is, as long as you're able to show that the cash flow from your investment properties covers the expenses associated with the maintenance of the property in terms of like principal, interest payments, property taxes, insurance, and then there is an additional amount on top, that doesn't affect your debt to income, because you have more monthly debt, but your income is higher than the debt. So your debt to income percentage actually improves with the more cash flowing properties you add. So it was almost like there was no difference in terms of the application criteria as we progressed through the various loans from the first one, because you had same debt to income, or actually improved debt to income with regards to like the additional cash flow coming in. The other aspect of it, we've always done like typical conventional like loans for our investment properties, and for multi-families, those are above like 4 units, those go into commercial loans. Those can be structured differently depending on who is carrying the loan or who's going to be servicing the loan, and we can talk about that. For the rehab, we used a hard money loan to get the work done, to do the purchase and the renovation, and then when it was done and appraised, we refinanced the property into a long-term conventional like mortgage, 75% loan to value, and made that more into a long-term debt and paid off the hard money loan with the proceeds from that refinance. So that's kind of the process we've gone through there. And so each loan application has been very similar to the next, where you have a conventional, you put a down payment, you close, and then you source the tenants, you put them in, and you proceed from there. One of the things that makes it very helpful is we talked about, as we were progressing, and I keep touching on this because I think people get lost on the glamour of, oh man, you just need to keep pursuing and chasing this thing. But as you do that and you make financial progress, Tanya and I made the very, very hard decision that we were not going to start to, quote unquote, upgrade our lifestyle just because of this additional money that was coming in. We had a long-term goal of what we're trying to achieve, and so all that new money, it was already, by the time it came in, it was already allocated for. So in my mind, in our minds, it didn't exist, right? And so it's just that continued plowing, and that's what lays the framework. And when you go to a mortgage originator and they see that, look, the cash flow is increasing over time, but all the other like consumer debt or all the other consumer expenses, it doesn't change. And so you become a better and better borrower to the mortgage originator, the more and more properties and the more quote unquote debt you have.
Yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, so key thing again, which we probably sound like a broken record now. I feel like people really need to hear this, especially in this day of social media, man. Like there's just so much pressure out there. So develop the habit of living below your means, because if you just think about it, so with what IBK is talking about, they were in this situation, or they are still in this situation where, assuming that expenses are in this level, with every new property they acquire, of course, they're getting more income because of the rent. So like the income, the money you're making is increasing, but your expenses are staying the same. So that leaves you a chunk of money which you could save to pour into the next property. And for those that even would want to do something, let's say luxurious, you even have more money to at least splurge a little bit. So the key learning there is irrespective of however your property will be financed, the important thing is just making sure that you're having enough cash in the bank. And how can you do that? Making sure you have a very disciplined lifestyle. Awesome. So I also wanted to touch a little bit on, you mentioned property management earlier on. Do you still have a property manager, or was it just that?
Oh no, we still do that ourselves. That was one and we tried to like hire property management again afterwards, but they couldn't do it the way I did it. And I'm a very hard stickler for like how to manage things. And because I can give you an example. Because of the demographics of the people that we work with, you know, the property management company is wanting to have like a tenant portal where they'll be sending messages to the tenant. They put service requests through this tenant portal, and it's very techy. And I'm like, look, man, the people we work with, they don't have time for all of that. If you need to they need a phone number that they need to call when something is happening or whenever they have an issue. And if you're not willing to hire people to take that phone call, because no robot on the phone is going to be able to adequately address the issues at the time. And it didn't seem like there was that sweet spot, because having people on call is very expensive. And so trying to manage that. And when it comes to property management, one of the ways we've handled it is we have contractors that we work with. So for example, all we do right now is delegating responsibility, right? So let's say a tenant has a toilet, it's not working. They send me a text, and the way we do it is text message. So send me a text, oh, having so-and-so issues with the toilet. I ask a couple questions over text, and I'm like, cool. So I know who to call, reach out to so-and-so. Could you go to so-and-so property and go check out the toilet? What time are you gonna be there? Oh, I'm gonna be there at so-and-so time. I respond back over text, and I'm done. Like, I pay the contractor virtually. So the time commitment for me being physically going to the properties is not as high, but there's still a responsibility of making sure information gets passed across to the right people to go do the right thing. So that's one of the things that has made it easier for us to like still personally manage the properties as we've kind of increased the number over time.
I see. There was something you mentioned that I feel it's a really good point, like how you mentioned that typically property managers would use like maybe the tenants portal. So the reason that really stood out to me is because there's a typical way things are done, but as you go through things in the game, you may realize that maybe there are other ways things could work out better for you. And then speaking about contractors as well, I feel working with contractors, and I'm talking from my own experience, right? Yes, there are times that you have good contractors that, of course, if an issue happens, you send them to the property, they get it fixed. But we've been in situations where our contractors have ghosted us.
Of course.
Right, so that's the...
You're not doing anything right unless they've ghosted you. Carry on.
Exactly. So I think that's also my big question, like when it comes to managing all these properties. Of course, I understand that not all properties would have issues at the same time, but how have you just gone about, tenant management, in terms of like managing repairs? Because I know there was once a time that we had this really good contractor that he was doing so well before we even recommended him to other people, and all of a sudden he ghosted us. And like when issues came up in one of our properties, it was like, who do we contact? It was such a tough thing. So I'm curious if you've gone through a similar situation and how you navigated that. How have you been able to find good contractors that actually stayed? Because that's so important.
Most definitely. I completely empathize with you because we've gone through the exact same experience. People you recommend, like it's a normal thing, right? And so here's our strategy of like managing that. I look at contractors like I'm single and searching. right? So if I walk around and I see somebody doing work that looks good, I always go up to them, hey, how's it going? Let me get your card. What kind of work do you do? And I have a Rolodex of people that I've met in passing, either like going through construction sites or like doing work in the area. And when you have that, you give somebody a chance. They're going well, and as long as you're doing well, you get rewarded with more business, right? Because you don't want to split your business among multiple people because it's not the same value to them. So I select somebody who has, the most potential, continue to work with them, provide them business. As soon as you mess up, you're out the door, and I have this line of other people waiting on the back end. So I find somebody else and I throw them in there and continue to reward their business. So this happened a couple times until we found the individual we're currently working with. We've been working with them for like a couple years now, and it's been going fantastic. And it's also just knowing that you have that backup, because the worst thing you can do is, be in a pinch and now need somebody and not have anybody. You have to start doing all the vetting at that point, right? So having just a backup of people saying, hey, look, if as soon as you mess up, I'm not really tied to you. I need to, because I've been in that situation where you're now begging the person, like, please, I just need you to come today. When are you available? And I really do not want to be in that situation. So it's almost like you're constantly looking, like expecting that this person is going to disappoint me at some point, hoping they don't, but expecting it and having backups.
Wow, I love that. So the key thing here is doing the work, right, before you actually need the person. So constantly, I was going to say networking, but networking is not the word, but
it's not really networking.
Yeah, but constantly like getting a list of contractors even when things are good. That's good, because I feel like that what you mentioned actually explains the situation we've been in, where we have like that one person we're working with and then we're having to beg, right? So the important thing is just doing the work now when things are stable and building that pipeline for future situations. All right. So let's go back to, okay, you've secured this property so far, right? I'm really curious to know what factors you consider when determining deals. I know for your first set of properties, or let me say your very first property, you really didn't work too much numbers like that, based off on what you mentioned. So, but as things progress, what were things or factors or criteria you were looking at that made you decide that, okay, this is a real estate deal and we're going to move forward with it?
For sure. So we're able to build like actually a worksheet that is shameless plug at talaniav.com, where you can, it's just a spreadsheet that we built that can allow you to put in your potential rent, the principal and interest payment, HOA fees, proposed management fees, any maintenance costs that you might associate with it, the amount you want to put as down payment, your interest rates, and all that, and then it will give you a calculation of your potential cash flow, your cash on cash return. So you're outlaying X amount of dollars, how much in cash flow back into your account are you getting from this property, and how long is it going to take you to break even? So there's a whole bunch of metrics that are in there, and so once you enter the values that it became a math problem, right? So you find this property, you say, okay, they're selling this property for $150,000, and I'm going to be able to put down $35,000 as a down payment. So let's put that there. So that means my mortgage amount is going to be whatever 150 minus 35. I'm not going to have property management costs. I'm going to manage it myself. You do a quick comparative market analysis to determine, okay, this property might be able to rent out for like $1,200 a month based on the market. So you have that, you get quick insurance quotes. You don't have to purchase anything to know what the potential insurance is going to be. You look at your average mortgage rate at the time, you put in all those numbers, and very quickly you're able to spit out a potential cash flow that I found out to be 85 to 95% accurate at that point, right? With that, is this cash flow good? There's no right answer. If you're cash flowing $1 a month, that might be good. That means you're not losing money. But maybe $1 a month might not be good for you. Maybe you want $300, maybe you want $500, depending on what your initial cash outlay is. And so this just gives you a way to analyze. Now, one of the things we do is as far as like cash on cash return. So let's say the down payment in this situation was $35,000. We typically look to have a minimum of a 12% cash on cash return yearly, right? So this is just like if I put in the numbers and it's not giving me 12% a year on the cash I'm putting as a down payment, then I don't, like, there's no point chasing that down. So it's just a small metric, like a hurdle rate. And so once it meets the 12%, then I can start looking, okay, what about this? What about this? And you start doing analysis. But that 12% hurdle rate, now for some people, they might say 20%. From other people, it might be 7%. So I would just want to highlight there's no right answer, but doing a serious analysis of all the numbers for the property, then it becomes a math problem. Does it cash flow? Does it not cash flow?
Yeah, so basically it's a numbers game, right? It's a numbers game, and I'll say like the big thing based on what you mentioned is that everyone would have different goals. So someone else's goal doesn't have to be yours, right? The important thing is that you do all these calculations beforehand so that you are not surprised later on, right? And doing those calculations. And I know for people that are relatively new to this, because I know when Bayo and I, my husband and I first started, we had our spreadsheets as well, because my brother, who is also into real estate, helped prepare a spreadsheet for us. But one of our biggest challenges was, what should our goal be, right? So I guess maybe like for others that are wondering, like, okay, what goal should I set for myself? I guess the important thing is just maybe leaning on to others that are well vested in the markets, just to get advice. And as you do it, the more often you do it, you'll be able to hopefully be more confident in the goals you're setting for yourself.
I also think, just to add on that, it's a matter of what your time preference is, right? So somebody with high time preference who wants something like in the next 3 years will have a very different goal than if you have a low time preference. So for example, now, we buy properties with the intent of never selling them, right? Okay. So with that in mind, how much are you willing to collect into perpetuity that will make you feel confident about the cash outlay you're putting now? The number is going to be very different if I'm looking to sell this property in 5 years. So these are little things that, so for example, I might be okay collecting 12% forever, right? And that's fine. If you're trying to sell in 5, man, I'm trying to make all my money back in 5 years, so 12% is not going to cut it. I need a minimum of 20. Right? So it just depends on what your timeline is, what your time preference is, what your goals are. And so when people ask me what's the right amount, I'm like, it depends. And people hate that answer, but it really depends on so many factors that are pertaining to you.
Yeah, I see. That's good. So it's really about your own goals. And like they say, experience is the best teacher. So as you do it more often, you just become more confident in some of the goals you're setting for your investment. That's good. And so I wanted also even talk about tenant management, right? Because with 18 properties, we're talking about how many tenants? Probably not less than 30, right? Or not less than 20.
So actually what is interesting is one efficiency we had is renting our properties as collections to businesses. So a group of our properties are rented to an assisted living company. And so you have 4 units that are occupied by 1 tenant. And so that way you don't have 4 different tenants, you just have 1 tenant that is using 4 different houses.
I see.
So that's an efficiency to reduce the risk or the amount of bandwidth that you have to manage. So you do this for like 2 or 3 of them, and now you're dealing with like 8 tenants as opposed to like 18 or 30. So that's kind of an efficiency that we've had.
Oh, I see. So most of the time you are not renting to individuals. You're renting to like organizations, to businesses.
So
interesting.
Some of them are like that. Now there's some that are also individuals, and then there's some that are rented to people who are doing like Airbnb arbitrage, who are renting a property from you and listing it for short-term rentals or corporate rentals on the back end. And so that's another efficiency, because to those properties, the people staying there don't know who you are as the owner. The only person they interact with is your tenant. And so you don't really deal with the day-to-day issues associated with owning that property as you would if you were renting directly to an individual.
I see. So for like example, the people that are, renting it for Airbnb purposes, I'm guessing they're paying you the consistent monthly rents. The reason I ask that is because Airbnb in itself is not, the income is not stable. Let me put it that way, right? There are times you may have people willing to stay and whatnot. So what is going on is that you're still receiving the consistent monthly rents. They are the ones having to deal with the, yeah, exactly. I see.
Yeah, and that's the risk they're taking, right? So they have a fixed cost, and anything above that is theirs to keep. I don't ask for more rent if I see that you made more money this month. And if it's lower, then it's the risk of doing business. And so they are interested in having just fixed cost overhead, and then it's up to you to grind and do whatever it takes to get your property filled as often as possible.
Wow, okay. So I'll say some of the clients are Airbnb. And when you say like businesses, are you talking about companies as well, or?
Yeah, so these are like corporate rentals, right? So let's say you are a placement agency and you are looking for properties, and what your job is to staff expats coming in from out of the country for this particular company. And they don't want to stay in a hotel. They want a house. They want to be able to move around.
Yeah.
So you are like, oh, I have this property available. Do you want to come stay for the next 6 months? I don't know what deal they're striking with the people who are the company who's actually bringing the people to stay in. All I know is you owe X amount every month to pay to me. Whatever you make on the back end is your business.
Wow. Another question, how did you find out about these opportunities?
We are very open to, being open to change is being able to investigate things. So I'll give you an example. One thing that changed in the middle, after our first investment, we realized that, okay, we're gonna be making these purchases going into the future, right? And it only makes sense we realized that, okay, there's a real estate agent facilitating these transactions who makes a commission off of our purchases. And why don't we just set up a situation where we eat our own cooking? And that means, why don't I just become a real estate agent and represent us during transactions and get a 3% commission off of every purchase that we make? So that was one step. I went ahead and got my real estate license, and now I'm a broker in Texas. The benefit of that is we list our own properties on the MLS and on all the listing websites, and we manage our own showings. And one of the benefits of managing showings whenever you have properties for rent is you meet people with varying kinds of needs. And they come through, and so this is, you just meet somebody like, hey, look, man, this is nice, but I'm actually looking for XYZ. Okay. You take that information and you, like I mentioned, you have a Rolodex of people who you're keeping in contact with. And for this particular situation, we had literally, it was the day we bought the property. We bought a 4-unit complex, and I had another single unit listed for rent. And right after closing from the 4-unit purchase, I went to go show this property, and I met some. They're like, yeah, I'm looking for something like this, but I need like 4 units, like a community, but this is nice, but I'm actually looking for more. I was like, guess what? I just have something that you might like. And so we drove to the other place, showed it to them. They're like, this is perfect. We'll take all of it. And so that 4-unit complex ends up just one tenant that is there running an assisted living facility from it. So that's the way we were able to meet people with different kinds of needs.
I see. So being the broker kind of I'll say gives you visibility on what are some of the things that are going on behind the scenes, so that if you're showing a property that someone else is not really interested in, through conversations with them, you'd be able to figure out what they want, and you might have what they're looking for.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot for, excuse me, what you've shared so far. I'll say as we wrap up, right, one of my other big questions is, what were some of the challenges that you faced in your journey to 18 properties?
There's the biggest challenge is dealing with situations you haven't managed before in the past. And there's a certain level of resilience that builds in you when they're able to overcome something that you had no idea how to manage. And this ranges from issues, like we've had a lot of crazy stuff happen in properties, from crime happening, like to, I think our property is a couple of our properties have ended up on the news, like because of either an issue of either domestic violence, and then you're like, okay, what do I do here? Like, what role am I meant to play here? And just dealing with all those challenges, and it lets you, it builds a certain level of confidence. You're like, man, when the next one comes, the way I dealt with that, I'm sure I'll be able to figure this out. So now when things that are crazy happen, you're just like, okay, what's new? What's the next step? And you just progress through that. And being able to deal with the unknown is a massive skill that I can't quantify the value, but just not being flustered whenever something that you haven't dealt with before shows up is great. And it also opens up opportunities for you to try new things because you've dealt with so much in the past. You're like, I think this would be cool. I'm sure you've had like numerous ideas or thoughts, but you just don't know how to progress. And you're like, I just don't have the skills. You figure, like when you've had repetitions of figuring it out, you feel more confident and go, okay, what's one step I can take that will nudge me in the right direction? You might not know how to get to the destination, but if you can see one step in front, take that step and continue to take that step, and the path to what you're looking for opens up. So it's a challenge, but also a good lesson and skill we've been able to develop from being very actively involved in our real estate investment journey and managing the properties ourselves.
Yeah. Wow, yeah, that's good. It's just like what they say, what doesn't kill you, I hate using that word, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And
Yes.
yeah, and what I've just learned as well in life is that every challenge is an opportunity for you to grow, is an opportunity for you to even become stronger, which of course you've attested to that. And speaking about that, there was actually another question that came to mind. Have there been any real estate purchases that you have regretted making?
So let's put it this way. Because of our strategy of not ever wanting to sell the property, it's never regretted, right? One thing that people wonder, like, why does real estate work, right? Why does it work? It works because we have an ever-growing money supply that diminishes the purchasing power of any existing dollar that there is. And so you putting your dollars in a hard asset that is scarce and is in limited supply is a way to preserve the purchasing power. So even though you might have overpaid now, it's going to come back good. It's just a matter of when. Because rent prices are always increasing. Like, let's say you purchase a property now and you were hoping to rent it for $1,900, but then the best you could get was $1,800.
Yeah.
And so let's say you're $100 in the hole. It's only a matter of time before that property starts cash flowing positive, if you're willing to wait. Now, there were some at the time that were like, oh man, I wish I had bought something different, but you wait like 3 years, you're like, okay, it's fine now. And so it just depends. So I wouldn't call it regrets. It was just like, they weren't as profitable at the time. And eventually you're like, oh man, we're actually making a decent amount of cash flow as you start to increase the rent over time. So now that could be different. If I plan to sell in 5 years and I'm only starting to get positive cash flow in year 4, then yes, that is a regretted purchase. But the strategy we've employed gives a lot of flexibility to do whatever with, just because of the low time preference we have.
Yeah, that's good. So basically for the long-term real estate purchases, I guess I'll say like one of the things I really love about real estate, like you mentioned, is the appreciation. So even if like things don't really seem to be working out now. It's a matter of time. The other thing you mentioned is the rent increase, right? So over time, rent actually does increase. So that's the benefit for those that own real estate. You can also increase your rents to be able to compensate for mortgage and other expenses that are coming up. Awesome. So which brings me to my next question on what has been your biggest win? I'm pretty sure there are many, but what would you say has been wow for you?
I'm going to tell a story that happened, and this is like, it still blows my mind. So during COVID, like in 2020, we were, everybody's locked down, nobody understands what's going on. The whole, society is like, what is this period? And in my spare time, I usually just browse the MLS to look what properties are on the market. And we see this very brand new 6-unit community that is listed for sale. At the time, the property was being listed for like $500,000. And I was like, this is a 6-unit property. It's a commercial property. That means it's a commercial loan. That means the minimum down payment is 25%, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't have 25% to put down on this property to get a conventional loan. But as I was browsing through, there was a comment there that seller financing available. So we were just at home, and I remember talking to Tony. I brought her in. I was like, hey, take a look at this. What do you think? I was like, I'm just going to call the seller. I'll just call him. And so pick up the phone, call the guy, we're talking, I'm like, hey, I'm interested. And he was like, what do you do? And then we're just chit-chatting back and forth. He was like, oh yeah, I used to be an engineer too, but then I started doing real estate part-time, and then I started doing it full-time, and we were just bonding. And I was like, okay, so after a while, I was getting like aggravated, because I'm like, I didn't call you to get to chat. It was an older gentleman. I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing with this thing? And so I asked about the property, and he was like, yeah, I'm willing to seller finance this for you. And I'd never done seller financing before in the past, and all that means is he owns the property outright, and he will transfer the deed and the ownership rights of the property to you for a specific agreed upon amount, and then just hold a lien with the city that you owe him this amount at this interest rate. This is the monthly payment, so there's no banks involved. It's just between the both of you. And so he asked for all the information, and I was never done this before, and I was just like, whatever, let's just give this a shot. And we started, and he said, I'm going to give you this. At the time, keep in mind, this was during COVID. Yeah. Where interest rates were like bottom. He offered a 6% interest rate on this property, which now sounds good, but at the time it was ridiculously high when people were getting 2 and 3s, right? So I was just like, whatever. He was like, I'll give it to you for 6 months. In that 6 months, go find tenants. And the good thing about commercial properties is the value is assessed off of the net operating income, pretty much the cash flow from the property, as opposed to just a regular appraisal, right? So I knew in that 6 months I needed to go find tenants and have them pay the highest rents possible, so that the appraisal value on the house on the back end would be higher. So did that, really scrambled, was paying this guy his 6%, and when got the place fully rented out, had to go apply for first time ever doing a commercial loan, did that whole back end. It was really tough, and that's a whole different story, but figured out a way to get a commercial loan on this property, because a lot of banks weren't lending at the time, especially if they didn't know you and you didn't have a track record. So got that done, and when they did the final appraisal on this property, it ended up appraising for about 800, right?
Oh, wow.
And so in the back end, when we did the refinance out of the seller finance to pay him off finally, we didn't actually have to put any money down. We actually got money back from the property, and got him paid off and got into a long-term loan on the property, and had a massive amount of equity built up from. And I forgot to. One of the terms we had was the down payment was 10%. So I had to give him like 50 grand to be able to get into the seller financing. So that was a big win. So pretty much turned $50,000 worth of equity into $300,000 worth of equity in the property. So that was a huge win. And so the reason I'm telling this story is every step of the way was doing something that we had never done before. I never called somebody up randomly and be like, hey, I don't have the money, but what can we do about that? I had never done seller financing before. We had never done a commercial loan before, and we had never done a commercial appraisal before to do the refinance. So all of this was brand new, but just not freaking out, because the easy thing, if he says, okay, I will do this for you, and you've never done it before, be like, I don't want to do something I never know. You back out and would have lost out on this really, really great opportunity that showed up. So that's a huge win for us.
So I'll say like the big takeaway is don't limit yourself, because I've noticed a lot of people, of course, it's good to be aware of the challenges we have, but don't let those challenges limit you, right? There are other ways certain things can be done. And I also really like what you mentioned about being open to try new things, because a lot of times people, and I'll be honest, I'm also guilty of this, right? We're sometimes afraid to take the very first step at doing something different, but never let that limit you. If something doesn't go well, you would learn. It just reminds me of a quote I've heard before. I never fail, I only learn. Right, so I either win or learn. So that's really good, and I mean, big congratulations on that. And I mean, this is really, really exciting to learn and, of course, know about your journey. Yeah, so I'll say as we wrap up, the last thing I have here is, what would your advice be to newbies, right? So to people that maybe are interested in real estate and they don't even know how to start, or people that maybe have just started but they don't even know how to progress.
Don't be afraid to fail, because the only true failure is when you stop trying.
Wow.
If you have a goal, continue working towards it. Celebrate the small wins too. And I'm preaching to myself, because I have this like bad habit of, as soon as you get a win, you don't celebrate it. You're like, what's the next thing, right? Celebrate the small wins, and because you are doing great. And for people who want to know how to start, I would say, like, build your financial resilience by making sure, for the last time, I would say, you have a very big gap between what you make and what you spend just to live, because that opens up the door for a lot of opportunities. That's the first step to start this journey, because there's nothing that kills you or makes you more vulnerable than living so close to the edge and any mishap completely knocks you off, right? If you want to stay for the long term, you need to be resilient. And there are things, like, guaranteed, bad things are going to happen, like, no doubt about it, right? But your ability to take the hits and continue moving is the only way you can continue to build success. And without having a huge cushion around you, it's really hard to take those hits. So that's just the advice I'll give.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And before we finally go, I know when you and I were talking offline, of course, you mentioned you have your real estate license. Would want to give you the opportunity to let our viewers know programs you have or are currently planning for to help those that are interested in real estate. For
sure. So we realize that there's a lot of longing for information and community of like-minded individuals. And so Tanya and I were able to create this platform or community called the Creator Success Club, which is tailored towards content creators and wealth creators. And within this community, there is a finance hub for the people who are interested in creating wealth, where it's just a group of professionals from different walks of life who are interested in, understanding more about finance, understanding more about real estate, building a community of like-minded people where you can chat and throw questions and have multiple people answer it. So this is not a guru club. I do not claim to be a guru on this platform. It's just an opportunity for people to communicate and ask questions at different stages, right? And so we have there's a community there, which is just a knowledge center where I write different articles and videos pertaining to various topics around the program. We have a wealth conversations tab where everybody just throws in questions, random questions. Did you see this today? today? What about this? Does anybody know why this is happening? And you get community responses from everybody else. And then there's a section where you can share, what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve. And once you put it out there, you have a group of community folks who are going to ask you about it and keep you accountable. So this is just a platform to get that sense of, connection to people who share the same goal. And I will definitely make sure, I will send you a link just in case people are interested in being part of this program. It's virtual online, and so it's a great chance to learn and also meet people who share the same passion as yours. Maintaining this community has a team of people behind it. So for the Finance Hub, it is $9.99 a month. And this provides you access to all the written material, the community base, and all that good stuff. And if you're interested, and if you're a real estate investor, you can put this towards your business expenses as far as networking and communities whenever you file your taxes. So it's an expense you can definitely write off. But there's a lot of value here in the community, and we wanted to not make it too out of reach. And my thought was about $10 a month is something that is suitable for the level of value that you're getting out of it.
Yes, I agree. $10 only. I'm really stressing on the word only because a lot of us go out to eat, right? For people that
I know.
No, yeah, that's true. Like, I know there are people that love Chipotle. I don't eat Chipotle. I think like maybe a plate of a Chipotle rice bowl is it about $10? So just sacrifice one Chipotle. It's
actually more than that.
Really, exactly. So yeah, and I know I also love to go out to eat. Whenever I go out to eat, I even spend probably maybe like 4 times, 5 times that amount. And this is an investment because you're only going to be putting in $10 a month to get a huge return. But one thing I love that you mentioned is community. I'm a sucker for quotes, and I remember this quote that says, if I have seen further than others, it's by standing on the shoulder of giants. I really love that, and I love that for our viewers as well. So I really encourage you all to tap into that. Wow, this was so awesome. IBK, I just want to say thank you to you for your time. It's amazing that I decided to do this interview for others to learn, but I learned a lot from this. Like, after this, I'm really looking forward to talking to Bayo about, oh my God, our next strategy for real estate. I learned a ton, and I'm pretty sure everyone out there also learned. So make sure that you share this video with others to help them as well. You don't want to get rich alone, right? You have friends, you have family members that, of course, would be able to benefit a lot from this. So make sure you share this video, and also make sure you follow my Instagram page and IBK Antolani's Instagram page so that you would not miss out on any juicy content that would be beneficial for you. Once again, thanks to our viewers, and thank you so much, IBK.
My pleasure.
All right, bye.